Radio listeners across Hampton Roads and environs, welcome back to another season of Opera Previews. I'm glad to be back with you. I'm excited about this season, and we're beginning with an opera that may be new to many of you, The Pearl Fishers of George Bizet. Uh, if I could see a show of hands out there, I'll bet 99% of you could tell me what Bizet's big hit was. Say it all. Let's say it all together, shall we? One, two, three. Carmen. Yes, you're exactly right. Somebody back there said a masked ball. You're fired. You can't listen anymore. Most of you know that Carmen was his big masterpiece that sent him into the short list of the greatest operas ever composed. The Pearl Fishers was written at age 25, and therein lies something that I need to make you aware of. That is remarkable. Now, we all know that there are prodigies in music. Felix Mendelssohn, Camille Saint-Saëns, Mozart, and so forth. All of these folks did amazing things at a very young age. But opera is different. You have to understand, opera is not a young man's game. Most opera composers' careers really go into forward motion in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. For Bizet to have produced an opera as thoroughly professional and as musically rich and sumptuous in melody as the Pearl Fishers is it's unique. Because let's look at it this way. Let's name three opera composers you're probably familiar with if you're listening to a program like this. Verdi, Wagner, Puccini. What did those guys accomplish at age 25? Not much. Verdi's first opera came out at age 26. That was Oberto, and you may never have heard of that one, and if you haven't, there's a reason for that. It's a little rough. His second opera, King for a Day, Un Giorno di Regno, again, not really the kind of Verdi that put him into the history books. Puccini had done nothing in his 20s. He was still a student, basically. The only thing he had written was, love letters to a bunch of pretty Italian girls. Wagner had written two operas that are a little bit past the student level. One called The Fairies, Die Feen, and another Der Liebesverbot. They're not performed. They're very problematic. They're very awkward. He had not found his voice. So you see, for an opera to have entered the standard repertoire by a composer who wrote at age 25, as Bizet did with Pearl Fishers, that's pretty remarkable. And in fact, let's consider Carmen. Carmen was the really profound masterpiece of breakthrough genius that advanced the art form, which he wrote at age 37 and died shortly thereafter. Now, I want to go back to our three, holy trinity of Verdi, Wagner, Puccini. How famous would they be if they had died at age 37? Well, Verdi would be the most well-known. He would be considered a pretty good composer. His masterpiece would probably be considered his adaptation of Shakespeare's Macbeth. Macbeth does have several very powerful and eloquent moments. Other than that, he had written Nabucco, Louisa Miller, and a bunch of not-so-good operas that were failures. He would be in the history books, but far below other composers. Wagner had written Rienzi, The Flying Dutchman, Lohengrin, Tannhäuser. So he would be a well-considered German Romantic composer at about the level of maybe Carl Maria von Weber. We did not have his great genius masterpieces Tristan und Isolde, The Ring Cycle, Die Meistersinger, and Parsifal. Much lower stature. And Puccini was really a late bloomer. By age 37, Puccini had written Edgar and Le Ville. Again, operas that are fairly obscure, rarely recorded, almost never performed. So for Bizet to have written an opera that many people consider a contender for the title of the greatest opera ever written in Carmen at age 37, do you see the magnitude of that achievement? And think of what might have happened had he lived a normal lifespan. Bizet should have lived to see World War I. He died in 1875, not yet 40 years of age. If he had lived to be Verdi's age, What would a 20th century opera by Georges Bizet have sounded like? The mind boggles. He would have been one of the supreme gods of opera, up there with Mozart and Verdi. Uh, for him to have died when he did is an incalculable tragedy in the opera world and music history in general. It's as if Shakespeare had written Two Gentlemen of Verona and Twelfth Night and then died. And we had missed all of those masterpieces, King Lear, Othello, and so forth. I believe that when Bizet died, we lost opera's Shakespeare. I really do. So it's of great interest to see what a young Bizet turns out in this very romantic opera. And what kind of opera is uh, the Pearl Fishers? Well, in mid 19th century Paris, we didn't have films yet, so the equivalent kind of entertainment was theater, either straight drama, straight, legitimate theater, or music theater. And there are genres of opera that correspond to the genre of movies that we can choose from today. With Berlioz's Les Troyens, we have a big blockbuster, a big budget epic like Lawrence of Arabia or The Lord of the Rings and so forth. Uh, or a Parisian might have gone to see a silly comedy, a vulgar comedy with a little political satire, with the operettas of Jacques Offenbach, La Belle Hélène, Orpheus in the Underworld, so forth. These kind of more or less correspond to some of the Hollywood comedies with Will Ferrell and Adam Sandler, a little gross out humor, a little bit vulgar, and some political satire. There are operas like Puccini's Tosca that maybe are like spy movies or suspense movies that we go to. And what is The Pearl Fishers? I would say The Pearl Fishers is what movie folks refer to as a date movie. The kind of movie that a young guy with a pretty girl might take her out for an evening on the town, dinner and a show. It's a romance. It's a love story. And the rise of this kind of opera, I think, has to do a little bit with the economic and social conditions of society in general in Western Europe, and especially in France. By now, the French Revolution is well in our rearview mirror, decades behind us. The old Paris has been bulldozed. We have the beautiful new boulevards. We have the Industrial Revolution. We have the factory system. We have guys who have factory jobs making widgets in French factories that belch smoke into the Parisian sky. And we have, as a result, we have people with money. We've created a middle class, what they call the bourgeoisie. It's no longer just the obnoxious rich aristocrats and the poor people who have nothing. We've got people with money to spend. And folks like that, the middle class, well, maybe they didn't, go to college and study all the Greek, Euripides and Sophocles. They might not be interested in an intellectual Greek, an opera based on Greek mythology. And a very nice middle-class couple might not want to be offended at something as vulgar as and racy as an Offenbach operetta. No, they want a nice love story, a discreet, sweet love story, a little exotic, with fancy costumes and pretty scenery, and the boy gets the girl, the boy loses the girl, and it has a happy ending, and then they go home and they've had a nice evening on the town. This is the kind of audience Bizet has in mind. And he's turned out a remarkably good example of this. Now, I can tell you, I know, I teach a lot of classes about opera around the Commonwealth of Virginia. I visit a lot of community groups and men's and women's clubs. I talk to thousands of people a year, each season, about opera. And I know what a lot of you like. A lot of you like melody. You like a good tune. And when there's, the style of 20th century opera that has a little less hummable melody, sometimes that gets you in a little bit of an uproar. Glenn, why can't composers write melodies anymore? Well, if you like melody, my friends, call up the box office today, because the Pearl Fishers is your cup of tea. You are going to love, love, love it. It is a sumptuous banquet of soaring melody, catchy melody, lively melody, romantic melody, erotic melody, memorable melody. If melodies were food, then the Pearl Fishers is like the buffet at the Golden Corral, where you're just intimidated. My goodness, there's steak and fried chicken and roast chicken and ham and turkey. Well, you just don't know what to eat first. That really is what the Pearl Fishers is like. It is a stream, an oil gusher of pure melody from beginning to end. And regardless of any other aspect of the drama, you're going to come out very well satisfied, and we've got some beautiful voices singing it. Well, let's take a look at the music now. And I always feel that my goal with these broadcasts, in fact, with any event where I'm talking to people about opera, either over the airwaves or in person, is to try to give you my perspective, my point of view about what is unique, what's significant, what stands out, what's unusual, what's memorable, what makes this a good opera. I am willing to believe that, I know a lot of you out there are very knowledgeable, and there are musicians who listen to these broadcasts and really know their P's and Q's about opera, but I also know that there are just casual opera lovers who don't have a doctor of music, as I have from a fine conservatory, and who haven't been hanging around the opera world most of their adult lives, as I have. I am a professional in the opera world. I've done pretty much everything you can do in an opera except conduct the orchestra, including composing them. So I like to believe that I hear things that may not register with you casual music lovers and opera fans. And I like to point these out to give you a little bit of context and give you some landmarks to listen for as you enjoy the opera when you come, and we do hope you'll come. Now, one thing that I think is maybe I don't talk about very often, and I'd like to now just to point out that even at age 25, Bizet was a composer very much in control of the craft and technique of music composition. He was a star pupil at the Paris Conservatoire, won the great Grand Prix de Rome, had subsidized government study in Italy for 3 years, and great things were expected of him. That's why he kept getting these commissions, even though he was really too young to be a successful opera composer. But he's got a good grasp of technique, and I'd like to point out kind of the structural aspect of opera composition. I don't think that a lot of music lovers, as they watch the drama unfold, are thinking about the way the music is, the blueprint of the music, if you will, the architectural plan. It's not just stream of consciousness melody writing, folks. There has to be a long-range plan for each scene that will provide elements of contrast balanced with elements of unity. There must be symmetry and balance. The drama of the Pearl Fishers, which is a drama about two men in love with the same woman, it's kind of based on the model of Greek drama, and as we know, in Greek drama and Greek architecture, symmetry and balance is very important. Now, as the curtain opens, we are in ancient Ceylon, which today is known as the island of Sri Lanka off the southeast coast of India. It's one of the oldest civilizations in the world. I actually read it's the first civilization in world history that ever had a dedicated hospital. How about that? In the 4th century BC. Several other very unique aspects of this historic island nation. And so we're in, ancient times. And this is the fact that it's such an exotic locale is kind of typical of what was happening in opera in the mid-19th century. You may recall from our discussion of Gilbert and Sullivan's Mikado last spring that once Admiral Perry had opened up Japan to the west, and there was all this rush of interest to explore far-flung locales outside of the Western Hemisphere, that operas began to choose exotic locales for their dramas. Verdi writes Aida. Leo Delibes writes Lakme, set in India. We have Gilbert and Sullivan in Japan. And now here is Bizet kind of getting on that bandwagon with a drama in ancient Ceylon. So the first thing that the initial scene in any drama has to do, it has two jobs. It must give us a sense of place. You can't start right in with the story, folks. You have to let the audience know, where are we? And then you have to introduce the protagonists. Let's meet the main characters. Probably not the prima donna. They always bring her on at the last minute to heighten the suspense because she's the glamour puss everybody wants to see. But we'll meet the other characters, and then we can kind of commence with the plot. So here's what I see in this opening scene. It's a great big ternary structure, A, B, A. Um, that's a very simple kind of thing. You have one theme, then you have a contrasting theme, then you go back and refer to that first theme again. But in this first scene, each of those sections, the A, once you look at it, it is also highly organized into a miniature ABA. The big B section is in a miniature ABA. And then we conclude with a kind of a coda or a rounding off closing section that refers back to the beginning. So as the curtain opens, we see people in exotic, hopefully scantily clad native costumes. I always like native costumes when they're scantily clad. Who doesn't? And the people of Ceylon, these pearl fishers, and let's face it, you know, I'll confess, pearls don't really grow in fish. The librettists were a little bit lackadaisical with this title. I've never heard a fisherman say, "Gosh, the pearls aren't biting today. I've been fishing all day long." Pearls don't like worms. You dive for pearls. You don't fish for them. But we'll give the librettists, we'll cut them a little slack there. I don't think they actually visited Sri Lanka. But the folks are just doing native dances, singing merry songs about life on their island, and oh, the sun is shining, and we love to sing and dance all the day, blah, 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 the type of thing that choruses generally sing. And it's going to start with a lively choral number, highly rhythmic, to catch our attention and make us realize this is going to be an entertaining show. It's like an opening number on a Broadway musical. So here we are. This is the big A section giving us a sense of place, and it's the little a subsection giving us a lively choral dance. Now that little rhythmic figure, ba-da-bum-bum-bum, ba-da-bum-bum-bum, you're going to hear that a lot. That's going to be one of the big unifying factors in this first scene. So there we have it. Now, the little B, the contrasting B section in our overall A section of scene one is going to be a little slower, more measured, more stately choral number. And as a matter of fact, it's the men themselves, the guys who do the diving for pearls, describing how they love their life. They don't care about the danger. Every season, regardless of the dangers to their lives, they help the economy of their community by going for those pearls. And if you listen to this, you'll see that it's very contrasting. To me, it sounds kind of like a men's glee club. This could be the glee club at Yale singing the Whiff and Poof song, and there's something significant about that I'll tell you after you've heard this contrasting excerpt. Nothing like hearing mellow men's voices joined together in close harmony. Now, when I hear that, I'm not just thinking, well, doesn't that sound nice? My ears kind of perk up because regardless of the language, yes, they're singing in French, but even if they'd been singing in English translation and I was hearing it for the first time like that, I would venture to guess that we were listening to a French opera, because that kind of men's chorus is something that I hear in French opera, and I don't hear that in Rossini, Donizetti, Bellini, Linguini, Fettuccini, any of the Verdi. I don't hear it in Puccini. I don't really hear it in a lot of German opera. I do hear it in French opera. For instance, in 1881, the Pearl Fishers comes out in 1863, by the way, I should have mentioned. So almost 2 decades later, Jacques Offenbach writes his final masterpiece, The Tales of Hoffmann, his attempt to write a kind of a date movie, a romantic epic. And when Hoffmann, in the prologue, agrees to tell the students in the tavern all of his life story, they sing a little chorus in which they're lighting up their pipes and saying, this is going to be good. Can't wait to hear this. See if you hear the resemblance to the Pearl Fishers Glee Club. I think that doesn't really require, a degree from a conservatory to hear the similarity. So there's a kind of an aspect of French opera to keep in mind. Now, we've had a lively choral number. We had something nice and contrasting and expressive. Maybe we should get started with meeting our main characters, huh? Nope. Because remember, we're looking for symmetry. If we have A and B, we would really like to go back and revisit that A. So to round off this first and complete this first big A section, we go back and revisit that very rhythmic, lively choral number, and that'll be followed by a little bit of a folk dance just to keep up the energy. All right, now the audience knows where they are. They're in an ancient exotic land by the sea with half-naked people dancing exotic dances. It's time we move on and meet the main characters. Now, for this, so we're in the big B section. And in the big B section, as in the big A section, there will be a little miniature ABA. And this will begin with meeting Zurga, the baritone. He is one of our protagonists. He is going to have some recitative, and you opera veterans know that is a dialogue portion of the show in which the dialogue is sung. It's not spoken dialogue in Pearl Fishers, as it was originally in Carmen before they changed it. So Zurga is going to have not a musical number, but just some sung dialogue in which he tells the natives that the king is dead, long live the king, we must choose a new chief, en chef. And this is a person who must lead us with courage, with vigilance, who must protect us. Nous protéger, he will protect us. And to a man, all of the pearl divers say, we want you, Zurga, Zurga, Zurga. He's our man. If he can't find pearls, no one can. And there's some additional dialogue in which he's very humbled and agrees to become their new leader. So here is some dialogue in which we meet the first protagonist.
Choisir un chef qui nous commande, qui nous protège et nous défende. Un chef aimé de tous, vigilant, courageux. Celui que nous voulons connaître, celui que nous...
Very good. And then suddenly there is a disturbance. The orchestra gets kind of nervous and anxious sounding, and a stranger has burst onto the scene of entering the community. You know, when you live on an island in the ocean, you don't get a lot of visitors. So, my goodness, who could this be? But Zurga recognizes him at once. It is his old friend from many years ago, and they're still young, so was this in the second grade? I get confused about the timeline here, but never mind. It is Nadir. Nadir is the tenor. Zurga is not seen him for many years. He's anxious to know what Nadir has been doing, and I think you can, if you listen to the character of this music, and Nadir is going to answer him with a short arioso, not a full-blown aria, but a short song with orchestra, very melodic. Listen to the character. We can probably guess what kind of a guy Nadir is because the music tells us, even if we don't know French. Well, how would you describe that music if you were going to come up with some descriptive adjectives? I would say bold, daring, confident, maybe even cocky. He's a man of action, a man of adventure. He's an adventurer. And as a matter of fact, in the French text that Bizet is setting, he tells us he's been hunting, not fishing. He's a hunter. He's been killing lions, tigers, and leopards all this time. Now, there's something else. So far, we've met the two protagonists, the two men. One of them was introduced with talking, with dialogue. The other was introduced with a bold melody, with a song, with lots of passion and boldness in it. Overall, what's the music telling us about these two guys? It's telling us which one is going to get the girl. Do you understand that? Nadir is going to be the one that we root for. He's going to be the one who gets the pretty girl because he's been the one that is being given already a heroic countenance. This is how opera music works. These are the subtle ways that composers give us clues, foreshadowing what the end of the drama will be. So just understand that. There's a reason that one of them comes in talking and the other comes in singing. That is the literary device of foreshadowing. We're going to be more interested in the singer. Well, now we've had the little a and the little b of the big B section, the contrast of meeting the two contrasting protagonists. So to round this one off with formal symmetry, the focus should go back to Zurga, right? With more talking, right? And that's what happens. Zurga welcomes Nadir and says, let's have a drink. Let's drink and you can be in our community and so forth. And that will flow without a pause right into the final big section, which refers all the way back to that ba-da-bum-bum-bum, ba-da-bum-bum-bum, rhythmic, lively choral music that we heard at the very beginning, thus bringing scene one to a close with everything you could have asked for from a young apprentice composer. Elements of unity, elements of contrast, a few good melodies. We have a sense of place. We've met the heroes, and it sounds like this.
Eh bien, repars à nos jeux. Ami, sois avec moi dans ces chants avec eux. Avant que la pêche commence, saluons le soleil, l'air et la mer immense.
Now, at the very end of that scene, the chorus whipped themselves up into a bit of a frenzy. They're dancing like, tarantellas, and they sang the women and the tenors sang those very high repeated notes at the top of the treble staff, bum 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 bum, over and over and over. Did you hear that? It was like, oh, it was kind of percussive sounding, or like little vocal karate chops. Those high repeated notes. Once again, when I hear that, I hear a musical device that is going to reappear perhaps more memorably in Carmen 12 years later. Because once again, I hear something that only sounds like Bizet to me. It doesn't sound like any other composer. And all composers have their little fingerprints, their little musical DNA strands that separate them from all the other composers, the things that make Mozart sound different from Haydn, for instance, even though sometimes they are similar. Well, in this case, I'm thinking about the scene in Act 1 of Carmen, when the girls of the cigarette factory rush out into the square to find the police or the soldier boys to tell them that Hellcat Carmen has slashed a girl next to her with a knife and started a big fight, and they're having a cat fight, and they have to come and arrest Carmen. Now listen to the cigarette girls as they describe the incident and see if you hear what I hear at the very end. Did you hear it? Bum, 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 bum. Those very violent repeated notes at the top of their range, just as we heard in Pearl Fishers. This is a Bizet thing. I have never heard an effect quite like that in any of the other standard operas that I've been listening to all of my life. So we've just discovered an effect that Bizet likes and which he remembered when, as a master composer, he's assembling the score to Carmen. And now we come to the one bit of music that many of you will know very well because it's so often recorded and so popular, even if you don't know the rest of this wonderful opera. I'm referring to the tenor-baritone duet, Au fond du Temple Saint, at the foot of the sacred temple. This is a duet for Nadir and Zurga, as they are recalling their backstory, because many years ago in the city of Kandy, there was this gorgeous, mysterious, very devout and pure, lovely maiden, a Hindu priestess. These folks practice the Brahmin caste. They're of the Brahmin caste of the Hindu religion. And both these young men fell in love with her at the time. And they came to blows. They were in danger of murdering one another, vying for the love of the girl. And they're recalling that incident in this duet. But first, they're remembering, it's like they're there again. They describe it in the present tense. They say, there she is. She moves with poetry. Her skin glistens. Her eyes are hidden by that veil. She casts a spell over us. It's like they're there again. And, I often tell my audiences that you don't have to prefer opera music over every other kind of music in order to appreciate it. You don't have to find opera music beautiful in order to appreciate it, just as you don't have to find film music your cup of tea to appreciate a film. But folks, let me tell you something. If you listen to this, I'm going to play you about half of the duet. If you listen to this duet, and after it's over you say, I don't know, it's all right. I like Duke Ellington better, If that's your reaction, can I just say, there's something wrong with you. Okay, it's not the duet, it's you. Here's Nikolai Gedda, the tenor, and baritone Ernest Blanc singing one of the most gorgeous duets ever written.
Une
Yeah, that's pretty good stuff. That I would venture to say that the multiple recordings of this duet all through the recording age is probably the single greatest factor in this opera having entered the standard repertoire. I know that in our just in North America, there are four or five regional opera companies like Virginia Opera that are staging this opera at some point during their current seasons. And you can give that wonderful duet the credit for a great deal of that. Well, it's time to meet the girl. One of Zurga's first official acts as the new chief of the pearl fishing tribe is to welcome the new priestess who's going to be arriving from India to be the new, well, they do have a spiritual leader in the old man Nurabad, but she will be the new priestess, and the priestess has a specific job on this island. She will go to a high spot, one of the volcanic mountains that are on the island. And if you look at some pictures of Sri Lanka on the internet, you'll find some of these hills that are created by ancient volcanoes. She will look over the divers as they dive into the waters, and she will pray to Lord Brahma for protection, to keep away the bad weather, storms, hurricanes, cyclones, all of that sort of thing. And there is kind of a swearing in ceremony in which Zurga makes her swear three times, just like the unknown prince's three riddles in Turandot and all of the instances of threes in Mozart's Magic Flute. It's always the mythical number in storytelling and mythology. She swears three times to be totally faithful to her sacred duty and to remain chaste and pure. She may not have any carnal relations with men. And she swears to do this. And when Zurga tells her what the consequences of betraying her oath will be, her certain death, she replies very boldly that she will be faithful even unto death. And, you know, when I heard that first expression by Leila, promising to uphold her sacred oath even if it meant her death, again, I thought of another moment in Carmen. Here's Leila.
Est agité, et bien, puis ce rivage, où le sort nous rassemble, reprends ta liberté.
Okay, now jump ahead again to Carmen 12 years later in the fourth scene with Don Jose holding a knife at Carmen's throat, saying, "You must tell me you love me." She says, "I'm not going to tell you that. Nobody tells me who to love. Even if I die, I will remain free and independent." Right? That's another version of what Leila just said. See if you hear the similarity in Carmen's statement. Yeah, I think we can tell those two passages are similar, and they must have been written by the same composer. Now, it's not just Carmen that I hear hints of or seeds of in the Pearl Fishers. About 8 years after the Pearl Fishers, Giuseppe Verdi, the greatest opera composer of his time, writes his masterpiece, Aida. And you know, there's a spot in Aida in which the populace of Egypt chooses Radames, the warrior, as their new military leader to lead them into battle against Ethiopia. And there's a big hymn of praise, a patriotic hymn, as they carry him off on their shoulders, exiting all the big chorus exiting triumphantly, leaving Aida alone on the stage to sing a great aria about how she feels about that. Well, 8 years earlier, the young apprentice composer, Bizet, composes really a very identical scene because the people of Ceylon are very pleased with Layla, their new priestess, and they're going to carry her off to start her sacred duties singing a hymn of praise to Lord Brahma. And they make their slow exit, leaving Nadir alone on the stage to sing about his feelings about what has just taken place. So here is that moment, a little bit of that triumphant hymn of praise from the chorus in The Pearl Fishers. Now, I'll let you in on a little secret. Bizet stole from himself to write that choral passage because one of his assignments as the winner of the Grand Prix de Rome was to write a Catholic mass. You know, all good Catholic composers have to write a mass, right? Well, that was actually that music you just heard originally had the words "Pleni sunt celi" from that early student mass. So he's taken a Catholic hymn of praise, and it has now become, through the magic of cutting and pasting, a Hindu hymn of praise. Well, it saved him some time, and it works just as well. Praise is praise. Kind of an ecumenical approach to opera, I guess. Now, we said that this would leave Nadir alone on the stage, and the thing is, he just recognized Layla as being that girl. You understand, neither he nor Zurga knew that their new priestess was going to be the girl that caused them to almost kill each other. Nadir has seen her, and bam, just like that, he's in love again. She has cast a spell upon him in the time-honored tradition of sexy sopranos and love-starved tenors. Now, I think this aria, Je crois entendre encore, is an unjustly neglected tenor aria. I think it's one of the highlights of this score. It's incredibly difficult to sing. It has a very high tessitura. It lies very high for the tenor voice, and you have to sing it very softly all the way through because this is Nadir literally almost unconscious. He really is in a trance. So it's not the kind of ardent tenor singing that Verdi or Puccini might give you. He's like under a spell. And this is about the most Eastern that I think this opera ever sounds. This music has a little of the sound of those snake charmers in India playing on their pipes and the pythons slowly rising in a reptilian trance. So here's a little bit of this really wonderful aria. So Nadir knows exactly who Layla is. Zurga He did not recognize her. That will come later. Well, it's time for, Layla is on the clock now. It's time to do some serious praying because the pearl diving season has begun and she needs to get up there and begin doing her thing. So, of course, the finale of Act 1 is going to consist of us seeing the priestess in action, praying to Lord Brahma, with the chorus of people murmuring their prayers underneath her, achieving a kind of a religious ecstasy. Now, if this sounds familiar, there's a reason for that. The premise of an exotic priestess who is going to come under sexual temptation is not new. There were two previous operas, Spontini's La Vestale, I think in 1801, but more famously Bellini's great opera Norma in one of the great bel canto operas in 1831. And that exact same dramatic situation is the basis for the famous aria Casta Diva of Norma, in which she is praying to the Druid gods and goddesses, while her people murmur ecstatically underneath her. And her praying at this point in the aria is a kind of a wordless chanting, just coloratura vocalism, with no words, because she has achieved that spiritual ecstasy where words are no longer necessary. Here's a reminder of what that sounds like. All right, now we'll hear the corresponding passage for Layla. And you know how young painters learn their technique, don't you? They go to the art museum, they sit next to a Renoir or a Van Gogh, and with a blank canvas and brushes and paints, and they copy it. They copy it. That's how you learn how to achieve the effects of light and perspective and so forth. Well, this is kind of what Bizet is doing. Remember, he's a little baby opera composer. He's an embryo, writing one of his very first works. Not his first, but he's still an apprentice. So it makes a great deal of sense that he is learning his craft by modeling this Act 1 finale on the Casta Diva scene from over 30 years earlier. See if you hear the resemblance. And pretty soon he's going to be a finished master, but he's still an apprentice. And that brings down the curtain on Act 1. Layla is going to get her own aria soon after the curtain goes up in Act 2. And here is where we have to understand that we're not seeing a very respectful or authentic depiction of the Hindu religion, because Layla also spotted Nadir in the crowd, and she was very excited to see him. She's in love once again as well, and before too long we're going to have ourselves a love duet. And I mean, really, the devout Hindu priestess promised for the rest of her life to uphold her sacred oath and refrain from carnal knowledge of men. Really? She doesn't even make it 24 hours? Really? She has one shift under her belt of praying, And because Nadir looks really cute in those blue jeans, she's going to already abandon all of her everything that she just promised earlier in Act One. And I know it's a love story, but it's a love story that doesn't really take into account the devotion of people whose religion is their life's calling. We won't worry about that. Let's hear the introduction to the aria Comme autrefois at the beginning of Act Two, in which Layla has recognized Nadir and feels comforted by his presence. She feels safer in this strange land because she knows that he'll watch out for her. And what's unusual, I like to point out the significant things. There is a solo French horn that you will hear in the introduction, the orchestral introduction to this aria, and that is a device that Bizet would resurrect again in Carmen, because the young, demure maiden Michaela, the commensurate character to Layla, is going to sing in her famous aria, Je dis. She's going to be praying to God, and again, there will be the unusual feature of a French horn solo all the way through that aria. But here's a bit of Layla's. Horns all the way through, a foreshadowing of Michaela a dozen years later. Well, it's time for these two crazy love puppies to get together and start, smooching. So here comes Nadir. It is an offstage serenade, one of the beloved features of opera composers in many, many examples. Nadir, we hear him coming. He's got to ascend this hill or mountain or however it's staged. We hear him coming before we see him. Here's a love-struck Nadir. Now, whereas Giuseppe Verdi may very well have learned a little bit from the Pearl Fishers about how to have a big choral exit, because the Aida scene was so similar to the first act scene with Layla departing with the chorus. In this case, it's the shoes on the other foot. Here is our young apprentice Bizet. I think borrowing the device from Verdi's big hit opera from about a decade earlier, Il Trovatore, the troubadour. Manrico, the hero of the Verdi opera, sings not one but two offstage serenades during the course of that opera, and that's probably when this device really became prominent in opera writing. Bizet uses it. You know, the next time I talk with you folks about Die Fledermaus, our second production of this season at Virginia Opera, Alfred makes his entrance with an offstage serenade. Oh, you hear it in Carmen, José in Act 3, Cavalleria Rusticana with Turiddu. They're just a whole gallery of offstage tenor serenades, and this is the apprentice making his mark, showing that he's just like all the other composers with his offstage tenor. So what's left but for a love duet? Wouldn't you feel cheated if there wasn't a love duet? It's everything you could want. It's soaring, it's ardent. Let's hear these two crazy kids as they break every sacred oath they ever made for the sake of a few kisses.
Est-il vrai que dis-tu, vous avez au bonheur? Oui, oh Dieu, j'ai compris le lien au sein de la libre quand
You know, it's often said that Bizet anticipated the new Italian school that we refer to as Verismo, in which opera scenes became and opera characters became a little seedier, a little less noble, a little less fairy tale-ish. You know, in old-fashioned operas, heroes and heroines were pure, they were perfect, and they were brought down by other people's villainy. This kind of is an example of the foreshadowing of Verismo. They sound very happy, but you know, there's something essentially false and wrong, really, about this love duet, because they are breaking sacred vows. They're not perfect. They're very, very human. That's the element of it that foreshadows the Verismo. So, of course, they're singing at the top of their lungs on the top of a rock. It's no wonder that they are discovered. They should have just kept it pianissimo, but no, they let their voices carry away with them, and they are discovered. Everybody is very angry with them. Nurabad is very angry. Zurga is very angry. Like I say, they didn't even make it 24 hours. And the natives are calling for their death. Leila was warned, you break your promise, you die. And so the natives are incensed. It's very understandable. They're calling for death, mort, mort. Let's listen to this, and then again, we're going to hear seeds of what was to become a very common practice in operatic composition after Bizet. Did that make you think of Turandot a little bit? When the crowd in ancient Peking is calling for the head of the prince who failed to answer the three riddles? I'm not surprised. Or it might have made you think once again of an opera that came soon after The Pearl Fishers, Verdi's Aida, in which the Egyptian people are calling for death to the Ethiopians. So once again, here is, I'm not saying that every composer was deliberately mimicking the Pearl Fishers. The Pearl Fishers was a fairly obscure opera by the time Puccini came along. However, let's face it, this is a device that became quite common, and this is a fairly early example of it. So Zorga now has a problem because he has had the epiphany that, oh my gosh, that's the girl that we sang the duet about in Act One. This is the girl that came between us. And he has an aria. We have yet to hear Zorga in a solo. His aria, for me, is perhaps the high point. I think this is a magnificent baritone aria. It's the last highlight I want to share with you today. And once again, I think there is an element of a dramatic situation that Bizet and his librettists, Monsieur Carré and Monsieur Cormont, have borrowed from a master composer, Giuseppe Verdi. 4 years before The Pearl Fishers, 1859, Verdi's Un ballo in maschera, The Masked Ball, makes its premiere. So it's still a fairly new work. It's still the rage in Europe and so forth. And the character Renato, the baritone, has a dilemma in A Masked Ball that results in the great aria Eri tu. His best friend, his lifelong friend that is like a brother to him, the King Gustav of Sweden, Renato has discovered that Gustav has betrayed him by having an affair with his wife. So he determines that he must kill his friend. He's going to join the band of conspirators who are planning an assassination, but he does it with a heavy heart. He loves the king, he loves his friend, but he must kill him. So he's grieving about this, grieving about the woman that is now never going to be his again, and so forth. Well, here we have something very similar in The Pearl Fishers. Zorga has made his peace with Nadir. They are as close as they ever were, but Nadir has broken that promise, never to let the girl come between them. So Nadir must die. He will die at dawn tomorrow. But this is a point of great soul-searching and agony for Zorga, and as a matter of fact, thinking it all over and remembering very conveniently a little cheesy detail from our librettists that many, many years ago, Leila was once saved Zorga's life by giving him shelter from his enemies. He gave her a bracelet or a necklace in return as a token of gratitude, and now he recognizes that she's wearing that item of jewelry. It's the same girl. He decides to let them go. Well, he sings a magnificent aria in which he works out all of his despair and agony. Now, just to compare, let's hear a few seconds of the ending of Renato's aria from Verdi's Ballo in Maschera, the ending of Eri tu. Renato grieving over the fact that he's lost the love of Amelia, his wife, and must kill Gustavo. And here is Zorga in his aria, O Nadir, ton ami, O Nadir, my dear friend, expressing something quite similar.
Malgré cœur irrité. Ah, pardonne.
So, look, don't feel that you should give this production a miss simply because we don't classify Bizet's Pearl Fishers with the same exalted, profound status of a great, immortal masterpiece that we accord Carmen. You know, not every movie that you go to is Citizen Kane, but you can derive great pleasure from movies that are well produced. I remind you again, The Pearl Fishers is a banquet of the most delectable melodies that many of which are going to be unfamiliar to you. So come to it, dive in, enjoy the tune fest and the moments of great drama that are also waiting for you, and just appreciate the process of a young composer, an apprentice in the opera field, discovering his voice. And what did we lose? Well, like I said earlier, when Bizet died at age 37, we lost opera's Shakespeare. We'll see you at the Opera House.